In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at mostly at select and mask feature in Photoshop. So we're going to have two images that we're going to combine together, a person and a background. I'm going to start off by going File to Scripts to load files in the stack because we want them as layers in a single file. I'm going to click on Browse. I am going to work my way to the folder, and I'm going to select all three of these. Don't need all three, but you'll see why. I'm going to click on Open and then on OK. Again, I don't, or not again, I do not need to attempt to align automatically or anything else, so I'm just going to click on OK. Photoshop will then open up the three files as layers, as you can see right over here. I'm going to close the property panel for now. And so here we have a very cyan blue man. We have some clouds, and this is where we're trying to take both of those, or something similar, okay? And I'm going to go and move tool, and I'm going to put this file down here for right now. I have my reasons, so just hang on. So I'm going to click once on the top layer, which is the blue man. His name is Keith. And I am going to add a curves layer, curves adjustment layer, because the color is so off. When I do, the properties panel automatically opens up, and I'm going to come to the middle eyedropper to neutralize. There's a gray card right next to him, so it's a perfect uh, neutral tone in order to take that blue out, as you can see here. So now we see a much nicer color tone, skin tone coming back in there. And that's what we needed to do. We don't necessarily need to change anything. If we wanted to, we could add a slight darkness, a slight S-curve to it, but we truly don't need to. So I'm going to undo those, and I'm just going to neutralize and just leave him right there. Okay. Now what we want to do is select Keith, select our person. There's several ways to go, but the simplest way is to go to the quick select tool. So I'm going to tap the letter W, and I'm going to make sure I am on the correct layer over here. So I'm on blue Keith, and all I'm going to do, it doesn't really matter really. I'll make it larger so you can see the brush. I'm just going to click and drag on Keith, and so this way I have him selected. The thing about it is I also picked up this black bar right down here. So if I go Command minus a little bit, I'm going to come over, and I'm hoping you can still see. So I'm going to tap the letter M for the marquee tool, and it's on the rectangular marquee. And I am going to come in. I'm going to hold the Option key because I want to delete the black bar to start with. So I'm going to subtract from my existing selection. And hopefully you can see I have a long, very narrow rectangular selection line just above the black bar while holding the Option key. I let go of the mouse button, then the Option key, and what it's done is it's deselected the black bar. And so now I don't have that, but I still have the white in his armpit area, between his arm and his body. A couple of ways to go. If I hold down the quick select and go to the magic tool, a magic wand tool, then I'm going to hold down the Option key again and click in there and come over and click inside the right side. So now I have effectively and very easily deselected from an existing selection line or subtracted an area from an existing selection line. I'm going to close this, and so that works very well. So now I'm going to look around a little bit, but I also see right here I did not grab this white section underneath his ear or above his ear on our left side underneath, so I could use the lasso tool. And I'm going to hold the Option key down again, and I'm going to draw along the skin line and back around to deselect. I'm going to make sure I don't have any above his ear here, and above our left side ear, and right at the earlobe again on our left side. So now I have a better selection line. Coming in, I'm looking at it, and it looks like it's pretty good. So I'm going to go Command 0 to zoom back out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a layer mask. So I'm going to come down here to the third button from the left. I'm going to click on it, and it adds a layer mask. The problem is now, hopefully you can see it, are two things. One, Keith has a white edge, which we don't want, and the sky is purple. We don't want either one of those two things. The sky is purple because of the neutral balance of Keith. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here to curves. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to double click on the icon of the curve. When I do, the properties box opens, and I am going to click on the make a clipping path. When I do, now that neutralizing curve for Keith is only affecting Keith and nothing else, meaning the sky. All right, so now what I'm going to do, let me do this. I'm going to go to, just as so you can see, I'm going to click on the 4 horizontal lines where the tab names are, and I am going to go to Panel Options, and I'm going to tell Photoshop to make the icons or the thumbnails on the layers larger so that you can see them easier. I am going to Command click. When I do, right here, I'm going to Command click on this. The cursor changes, and I'm going to load it as a selection line. So command clicking on the layer mask itself loads it as a selection line. So now that I have it loaded, this is the same position of my selection when I made the layer mask, but it has that white line around it, so it's not really a good layer mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it and right click, and I'm going to tell Photoshop to delete layer mask. All right, so now we're back to our starting point. I'm going to go up here to select the pull down menu, and now I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to tell Photoshop to modify my selection line, which is what area we're in, and I want to contract, I want to shrink my selection line, and I'm going to tell Photoshop just by 1 pixel, contract by 1 pixel. That's all we're going to do. I'm going to click on OK. The line will move, but we probably will barely see it. If you were watching real close, it actually came back in. So now I'm going to click on the Add Layer Mask again, the third button from the left, but if you notice I have less of a white line. Now I could do 1.5, so I could go Command Z, and if I open up my history panel, I could tell it to come back to my delete layer mask, which means I've undone the contract because let me show you. See, the contract is right here. That's where I contracted the selection line by 1. So I'm above it. So now I've backed up past that. I'm going to modify and contract. I could try 1.5 and click on OK. Oops. So we have to do 2. I'm going to say OK, and then add layer mask. Now I have 0 white line around him. So this is a very clean starting point of a layer mask. That's what we want. At this point, I'm going to come and I'm going to close the history window. I'm going to double click on the layer mask itself. And with this dialog box, it says, what do you want to do? We want to enter, select, and mask. So if you get this, we want to enter, select, and mask. There's three options that come up, and I wish I could show you all three, but we'll see if I can do it later. Where I am over here, I'm going to come to View. The downward arrow gives us different view options. Y is on layers, so that way we can see the background and how he interacts. Y is the keyboard shortcut while we're in Select and Mask. K shows us the actual layer mask, the black and white version. Letter T is white. Don't ask me where they came up with these keyboard shortcuts. On black is A, and it's not on black because of something I'll show you right now. So when we go to on black, we have an opacity slider that says, well, do you want 100%, you want 50, or how much opacity of the background do you want to see? So that's why it's not necessarily on black. So at 100%, it's on black. So this view, and here we have marching ants as well. V gives us a quick mask mode, if you know what quick mask mode is. My 2 or 3 or 4 is on layers, and I like seeing the mask to know what it's doing. And then I like to see if there's issues on black and on white that I need to be aware of. So those are the 4 that I mainly use. So for now, I'm going to go to and show you the layer mask. We're going to skip over the edge detection, and we're going to come into the global refinements so that we kind of understand what they do. So I'm going to tap Command 1 to come in at 100%, and then Command plus to go to 200, holding down the space bar so we can scroll over just so you can see. So I'm going to slide the smooth slider to the right, and as you can see how jaggedy it is? So I want to smooth it out just a little bit, and so that's what it does. It takes the jaggedy rigidness of the original line over. Feather is another word for blur. So it's blurring the whole image, but the effect is on the edge because that's where the black and white meet. So it blurs the edge, it feathers the edge, it softens it. Contrast will make it harder, as you can see here. So it takes away the effect of smooth and feather. But it's an important feature, but it adds contrast. Shift edge will move it in or out. As you can see, it shrinks in and it moves out. So it shifts the edge of our mask inward and outward. So it's kind of like what we did when we had our selection line. We went to the select pull down menu to modify to contract. We can also go to select to modify to expand, and that's exactly what it's doing here, except we get to see it visually, not as a line, but as an effect on the mask. So that's what those 4 sliders do. I'm going to leave feather, contrast, and shift edge at 0. I'm going to leave smooth, and because we want smooth to be smoothing, but as low a number as possible so that it's not interrupting everything more than it needs to. So it looks like 7 is the lowest. That applies a nice effect, but not too much and not too little. Now that we know what these do, I am going to go back and I'm going to do it on layers at 200% magnification, and that we can see right down here in the lower left. I'm going to add a feather because we want to soften. So again, it's a blurring of the edge. When we blur it, as you can see, it blurs from the edge of the mask both outward and inwardly. So if I want to do this too much, so now I pick up a lot of the original light tone background, but look, it shows the clouds through what is solid Keith and shirt. So it's adding blur going in both directions, and that's not what we really and truly want. We want it, but not at this level. But I want to define what it's doing. So I'm going to click back down here to, I'm going to probably leave it around 3. Contrast, if you remember, resharpens the edge, but look what happens. It's a refinement of the feather, because I do want, excuse me, I do want some bleeding of the background image into the background or into our foreground, because that's what makes it believable. But I don't want to see the original background. But now look, I have a little bit of white right in here. I have white coming back in on the ears. So it's moving everything around. So now if I shift the edge a little bit inward, I can start looking at ways that it's going to have less effects. So a little bit of a balancing act between these is what's required. Coming back with that. So now what I have, hopefully you can see this. I don't know if it'll show up, but these are my settings for these particular instance. And I probably wouldn't worry too much about these, but look at the misshapen ear. So I'm going to come up in the upper right hand corner and I'm going to click on, I'm going to click on high quality preview for one thing, but also show original. Look how much I've clipped his ears. That's just too much. I've gone way too far into this. So now I'm changing the shape of everything, and that's not acceptable. So I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to come back on my feather, come back on my contrast where just the white's not showing. I'll probably leave the shift edge. Now I'm going to show, so it's still coming inward, but it's more of an acceptable level to mask out the original light tone background. So it's very much, you know, a look and see type of thing. I'm going to come down here to output settings. Output 2. We always want to, in my opinion, and my recommendation is new layer with layer mask. So that way you keep the original and you can come back and redo this if you need to. We also have something called decontaminate colors. So that if you had a color on the edge, and it could be a white tone, and doing this, it looks at making a gray value, as hopefully you can see it here. We don't need it in this image because we don't have a tone on the edge. So use it judiciously, but also we have we have a percent slider. How much do you want to remove? So it might help on even this image, but not at 100%. I don't think we truly need it anyway, so I'm not gonna, but that's what it's for. And I do like remember settings, just because I may find that my selection process is very similar, and I'm looking around the edge. So what I'm doing now while I'm talking is that I may find myself doing a very similar closeness of edge all the time. So maybe these settings will be a close starting point. So remember settings is a nice way to begin. And now with all those, I'm going to click on OK. What happens over here is it creates a new layer with a layer mask. It turns the visibility off of the original. If I turn visibility on, watch the edge of Keith. It shows the original edge, a little bit of a white. So do not turn on the visibility of the original layer. That's only there in case we need to back up and redo. I'm going to tap Command 0, and there's Keith. And if I hold down the Shift key to unlock the layer mask, we can see what Keith is doing. I'm going to go to the Move tool. Now if I want to make sure that Keith, the original layer and the new layer remain, I'm going to Command click both so that they're both tied into each other. And I am going to click on this little link right down here. So this links these two layers together. Even though one's not visible, if I move this particular key, so I'm tapping the letter V for the move tool, and I'm moving down, both move. That way I can always have access, because if I forget to move and I crop, which I'm going to do now, then I may crop the original and I can't back up. Okay? So that's why I would link them together. Now I am going to tap the letter C for crop. I'm just going to draw around Keith a little bit here to get rid of everything. And if you're unaware, I can delete the crop pixels, or I can uncheck that and keep them so I don't have to worry about the linking. But if I'm worried about size, then I can get rid of them. So I'm going to tap return, and there we have Keith. And now I'm going to click once on my clouds, because I wanted to have everything look like this. And you can see the clouds are boosted up. Keith looks pretty close to the same. So now I want to, oops, I don't want that on. So I clicked once on my clouds. I'm going to add another curves layer. And in here, I'm going to add I'm going to create what's called an S curve. So I'm going to click down in the lower quarter and pull just that area down slightly. The upper quarter, I'm going to pull it upward. So hopefully you can see it creates that slight S curve. And so it's increasing contrast, it darkens the blacks, it increases saturation, it also brightens the whites. So if I turn that off and on, you can see what happens on the clouds. So now if I turn off and on, slight differences, that's okay. But that's how we're going to use select and mask. That's how we use our curves to neutralize, to change color, to change density, brightness with the clouds, saturation, contrast, etc., etc. And so that's a very, very simple two-image composite, and how we want to work the edge to make the composite more believable.